And YouTube already. Here we go. We are officially live. So the title of this one is a little misleading. I was originally supposed to have Denise on, but I do not have. And so this is going to be an interesting podcast episode. And it is going to be me interviewing myself. So this is really episode 0. So welcome to the Tiny But Mighty podcast. I am E, your host. I'm also the owner of Main Street E-Market over here in that corner. And I am the host of the Tiny But Mighty podcast for small business exclusively always. And really my goal for this podcast is a manifold, like a lot of goals. Okay, so I want to educate you on small businesses that exist. And so some of the reason why I want to do that is because as consumers, we don't really know where to go to be able to get that small business treatment. The big corporations are in our faces 24/7. They have all this money for commercials. And so they're going to spend it. I mean, obviously, right? And that is going to put us in a position where we are going to need to look for the small businesses, which is kind of sad, but they are tucked away in the background. And for the most part, we don't have the opportunity to be able to, I can't tell if I'm actually live over here. Maybe it didn't go all the way. That's weird. I think the Instagram's getting a little weird. Oh yeah, perfect. There we go. All right. So the reason is I want to make sure that I'm bringing awareness to small businesses that exist because we don't know where they are. And a lot of times when the small businesses change, something closes, something takes its place, we don't necessarily even know because we're not there frequently enough. And then we plan on going and it's not there. And then you're like, see, this is why I don't do this, because nobody has the time to be capable of going to multiple different places. But if we can figure out ways that we can help each other in terms of shopping with small business, I think that would be a really unique way to build some community around it for sure. But I also want to make sure that I'm helping these small business owners to tell their story because their story is unique and it's beautiful. Every single small business has been started for a reason, and that reason is different depending on who it is. Got my little kitten in the background on the Instagram feed here so you can see him. Actually, that's not my kitten. My husband would say that is his cat because it is. That's his best friend. That's his soulmate without question. Second one. I at least get first place on that one. But anyway, so when it comes to small businesses, telling their story, I think, is really important. And the research tells us that story-based marketing is actually very important. And, one of the things that I hadn't done coming into this is really tell my story. So that's the reason why I'm doing this. Is going to be labeled as like episode 0 of some variety of the podcast. I also think that it's really not fair that I'm asking all of these questions of all of these people and I've never answered those questions for myself. So I'm going to hold myself accountable to the same level of expectation of vulnerability and answer these questions because I think that that's important. And, if anybody pops into the live, wants to pop something into the chat, I will see that pop up and I would love to know what you would love to know. And it's okay if nobody comes in and does that. I do have my pre-assigned little list here. That is my list that I ask all of my guests. And let's see where this takes us. I did not write down my answers. I wanted this to be as authentic as possible when it comes down to the way that I am answering them. And so, I didn't, I'm coming raw with no corrections here in terms of the way that this is going today. Other than cleaning my office today, which, I think I can tell I'm a little sweaty and maybe whatever. But other than that, I have been focused on making sure that I can get this live going and have this conversation. We will be talking to Denise on Thursday, though. So if you are around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same link here. We will be on the StreamYard platform. If you want to support the StreamYard platform for us to be able to get the premium access, I would really appreciate that. There's a link in my bio wherever you see this video that you can click on and you can donate to. I would be deeply appreciative. It costs a little bit of money. I've put a lot of money into this business. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that I've done haven't necessarily brought back revenue, and that is okay. They have helped people. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm here for. But I can't really continue to invest financially into all of these things over and over and over again without a little bit of help from my friends. And if you're watching this, you're one of my friends. So I would really appreciate it if you would be willing to do that to help out. That would be great. Okay, let me just move this camera over to the other side. I just want to see if that makes a little bit of a difference in terms of things. Okay, great. You can see my little whiteboard wall behind me where I write down all of my notes and kind of keep myself organized. Okay, so first question here at 111, that's a nice little number for that. Tell us a bit about you before owning your own business. And I might do this in a two-part series because honestly, just this question alone, the answer is pretty loaded. So I have been everywhere. I'm a generalist. I've been all over the map. So I started my career early on as a biochemist. I was a biochemist by education and training in college, went to a big pharmaceutical company, worked as a temporary worker, which is something that's pretty ubiquitous to the pharma industry at this point, which I think is pretty sad because people go to school for a really long time and then they come out and they're making a pittance and they're not even getting paid days off. And I mean, they're lucky if they get health insurance. It depends on which company they're working for. But that is definitely something that was a really important event for me that really formed my opinion on the way that this whole system in terms of capitalism truly is working. Then I was hired full-time by that company in a different group to be able to do some more development work. The first group that I was in was a phase 3 clinical trial heading into a phase 4 clinical trial. And so it was a lot of routine, like not automation necessarily, but stuff that you do over and over again, and making sure that you're doing all of the testing to understand the effectiveness of that vaccine. From there, I was reached out to by a mentor of mine to find out if I'd be interested in coming back to the high school that I graduated from to teach. I had to go alternate route to get my teaching certification. I had started getting my teaching certification in college, but honestly, it is incompatible with being a science major and also working at the same time. So I was working 2 jobs. One was like close to full time so that I could have healthcare at the end because Obamacare hadn't happened. And once I turned 21, I was off of my father's insurance. And then I also had a job that I worked for money because let's be honest, when you're paying for health insurance and all of the other kind of stuff, there's not a lot of money that's coming out of that one. So I was definitely working full-time level hours and going to school full-time. And on top of that, these courses were taking me away from time that I otherwise would have been working on things. And it was packed. I mean, I had to have these crazy jam-packed semesters to be able to do it. And the worst part, they would tell us that we would have a couple of minutes to be able to eat while we're waiting to go into this like tutoring session, because you have these things that go on that you have to have like live practicum, whatever, but you have the meeting before and then you go in and it's just countless numbers of hours. It's just wild. And literally every time I went to go take a bite of my food, the professor would ask me specifically a question like, Erica, what do you think about that? I think I'd like to eat this sandwich. So it didn't work out. And that is okay. And I had to drop that specific class. That was the one. And it was just, I don't know if it was because I was eating and nobody else was really eating, even though I had cleared that with the professor that, you know, she felt a way about it. But I mean, that happens, right? Sometimes the person who's in charge has an ego bigger than the room and you can't take up space inside of it. That also really colored the way that I felt about being an educator and being in that seat, in that role. So it was an important moment for me. But the lack of empathy and just the lack of self-awareness that went on inside of that situation was just unreal. But anywho, so I ended up dropping that. I did get that call from my mentor, who was my mentor when I was in high school and ended up being my mentor in that role. And, you know, letting me know that one of the educators that I had actually had in middle school was getting ready to retire. And so she was doing that. I went alternate route. Went through the whole interview process. There were great candidates. I mean, it wasn't like a guaranteed thing. He was like, you're going to have to do this on like while still working. Right. So I took a day off, had the interview, you know, all of those kinds of things. And I went back and I taught for just shy of a decade at the high school that I graduated from. First, I was in earth science, and then I went into physics at the high school level, not the AP honors physics that was taught by a PhD who was just absolutely brilliant and such a fantastic mentor for me, especially once my first mentor retired. And that was the reason why I was in the physics department, because he had taught physics. So that was a fantastic time. And I loved teaching. I really did. The thing that I didn't love about teaching, which probably doesn't surprise you, is the fact that you don't always get everything that you need, and you're just asked for this like paper pushing, like, and so I think that being in a corporate job prior to that, and what really made me want to leave that was I had a point where I had a meeting about a meeting about a meeting. It was garbage. And so it was like the pre-meeting of the smallest group before we went into the pre-meeting, before we had the meeting. And I was like, this is a waste of time. I'm over this. So, and really, like, I understand from a rational standpoint the reason why people would want to prepare for a meeting, but it was internal to the group. So it was just a dynamic that was created by bad leadership and a lack of holding people accountable. And that's really the reason why it made me so itchy. So once again, another big like canon moment that ends up forming my opinion about what it is to be a leader and what leadership really shouldn't be as well. And yeah, gosh, that was an easy decision to be able to walk into the classroom, and it felt like a natural transition for me because I love kids. I get kids. And to be honest with you, I grew up with a whole bunch of mischievous young dudes, right? Like on my block, it was pretty split 50-50, but like the kids that I could walk to without crossing the street early on were all boys. Except for like one. So really, I grew up with a whole crew of dudes, and most of them were very mischievous and funny and fantastic. And that is the reason why I think it was so much easier for me to walk into a middle school classroom and thrive, because I thought their shenanigans were cheeky and fun, which also helped them to feel like my shenanigans were cheeky and fun, and they laughed at me a lot. And I was intentionally funny. Like I wanted them to enjoy it. Science is amazing. It's the most amazing thing to be able to understand something through a new lens. And maybe that's through a microscope or through a telescope, like truly through a lens. But maybe it's just through the lens of understanding instead of looking at something and feeling afraid of it, like a hurricane or a tsunami. Being able to actually understand what's going on, I think, is really empowering. And it doesn't stop at science. Being able to think critically and demand evidence is really an important thing to be able to do over the course of our lives. And I hope that I gifted that skill to a couple of my students over the course of time. And I still talk to a couple of them, check in on them. And, one has actually become a friend of mine because we ended up working on his senior project too. So I taught him in 8th grade. I didn't teach him junior year because he ended up not coming to me. All of my same students that I had in middle school, almost, I ended up having again in as juniors, which was really, really cool. And they just thought I was following them because I loved them. And maybe that's part of it. So if you see that and that's what you believe, yes, go for it. You just believe that, because if you were my student, you will always be someone that I care for. Anyway, so he didn't take physics at my level. I think he ended up taking it with a different teacher, because there was one other teacher that didn't teach honors that maybe was where he had gotten it, or maybe he got exempted. I can't remember what happened with that, but he still used to come and visit me all the time and talk. And I've had the opportunity to be able to work with him on a couple of different projects, one of which was his senior project, which was a documentary that was about heroin overdose deaths in the town that I grew up in, that he also grew up in. And it was a couple of people that were in the ballpark of my age. It was two in the grade above me and one in the grade below me. And they weren't all overdose deaths. Like there was complication. It was all related to heroin though. So that really formed my skill set in terms of video editing and all of the audio and lighting and this and this and this, right? So that I just said yes to because he needed an advisor. And like, why are you asking the physics teacher to be your advisor on a video project? Well, I was right across the hallway from the TVP room. So it made it easy for me to be able to walk over during my prep periods or after school or before school and be able to do some of the editing and kind of, sit there and think tank with him and just ask him a lot of questions and kind of guide him through the process, which was really awesome. And then we had this cool release and, preview night and all of that kind of stuff. That was really awesome. So for me, over the course of that period of time, that became another really important moment for me, because I was thinking about, well, why does this happen? Why do people end up addicted to opiates? And I ended up talking to a family member who was in recovery for heroin addiction and finding out so much throughout it. And I didn't interview him formally for the documentary or anything else like that, but that didn't mean that I wasn't learning and profoundly changed and impacted by the things that I learned along the way. And so much of it really boiled down to trauma, and it boiled down to pain that people were having that they couldn't see any other way to be able to heal and to solve and feel better with. And that really put me in the situation of sitting in the, wow, this is a public health issue. Years later, when I would go into public health education, where I was a student, that would come up again and again, right? So, but eventually I did have to leave. And one of the straws that really broke the camel's back in terms of leaving was the fact that they took away our supervisors. We did have department level supervisors, and they were over the top of 2 departments, but it really never felt like 2 departments, even though it was the science and gym teachers together, which is kind of interesting. And it's like, nerds do our work for us. They didn't actually do that to us. They were very good about doing their jobs. But, there were definitely moments that, we would help out with something or they would help out with something. But it was always small enough because it was a small school. I graduated with about 100 people, 99. So I think it ends up being a reasonable size meeting at that point with only 2. We ended up then being given 1 supervisor, higher middle school. And that definitely was not, they gave us the supervisors too, that everybody wanted to push back against. And it's a ploy, right? Like they know that these are the people that are going to cross the T's and dot the lowercase J's and all of that kind of stuff. But I was not going to be in that situation. They had changed all of the rules in terms of the way that we were supposed to write our curriculum and our lesson plans. And I mean, the lesson plans took so much longer than they had taken. And I'm lesson plan, absolutely, like have to have a lesson plan. But seriously, when you're talking team being the less important thing and the paperwork being more important, I'm out. I have no capacity for it. That was probably one of the happiest moments, being able to look at that supervisor and be like, I am not going to do this, and slide it across because I quit. And I had to give 60 days notice, and that was really torturous. That was really challenging, and it shouldn't have been that. They should have had a backfill for me earlier. But it is what it is. It felt like it was intentional. I'm sure it wasn't. Like, I'm sure that there was no malice, but at the same time, it was really challenging going through that 60-day notice period. But it had gotten to a point where I needed to be at this lab that I had started working at part-time over the summer. And so had I been paid better as an educator, I wouldn't have had that out, because I wouldn't have taken that part-time job, which a friend had approached me about. And it was in a next-gen sequencing lab in New Jersey. And she was like, just do it for the summer, do it for some part-time. And it was the same lab that she was working at. And department was right down the hall, and she did tox and they did next-gen sequencing. She was like, it's a department of 1. You need to help this guy. And I did. And there was just no going back. I loved being in the lab. And I felt like I needed to be there because the organization needed to happen. And, we were trying to get our licensure in New York State and all kinds of other stuff. And, the guy that was there ended up leaving. So that was a really cool situation. I didn't have a PhD in genetics, but I did teach myself everything that I needed to know, and then some, about next generation sequencing. And so much of that happened on YouTube. And that's why I say you can teach yourself anything on YouTube. I humbly believe that because, the vast majority of my knowledge and awareness and understanding of how to do all of that was from YouTube. Yes, I also took some really formal, courses. I went down to NIH and Bethesda, which was super cool, with a colleague of mine. And we were able to really get this whole thing validated and pushed forward and working it was awesome. And then by the time the pandemic rolled around, I had been being courted by another company, and they reached out to me on LinkedIn, which will always be suspicious to me for like the rest of forever. But it still is suspicious, but I was like, I guess, all right, cool. You're cold calling me. Sounds good. Recruiter. And they had been courting me in that recruiting relationship since, I guess it was like the end of January of 2020. And then we moved to New York from New Jersey in April of 2020 so that I could take on that role. And I had a team of anywhere from like 25 to 55, depending on the moment. And I guess you could go even higher than that for the moments that I was covering for paternity leaves, but that was for very short stints. And I had scientists that were in all disciplines all over the place. And I feel like my winding path that I took to get to that spot as kind of a generalist from a scientific standpoint ended up being very beneficial because it made it to where I had a lot of analogous skill sets. And also being an educator was very helpful because as an educator, you have to be the one to plan. You have to be the one that makes the rules. You have to be the one that makes the documents, that makes the presentations, that follows up, that checks for understanding, that makes sure that you write notes and you reflect at the end of your lesson and say, how did that go? If I were to do this exactly the same way again next year, is there anything that I would want to do just a little bit differently? Is there anything I would want to make sure that I kept in and go from there? And so that was naturally built into me. That skill set was already there. So leading the team at the small lab, same thing. I was able to be that self-starter because I already had that skill set. And I'm not saying that every educator has it, but I am saying that it's something that came naturally to me. And so I felt very lucky to be able to have that skill set because it made sense because you walk in the door and they're going to be every single place, big or small, that I've ever been in. There are lack of systems somewhere. There is a process that is so trash that only one person knows how to do it. It's all tribal knowledge. Nobody has anything formalized and it needs to be updated. And I will gravitate to that like a moth to the flame every single time. And I think really the reason is it gives me an opportunity to take something that's like a leaky bag of poo, turn it into this beautiful gift on the other side, clean it off, make sure. And now it's like tied up with a neat little bow. And there's instructions and there's an easier workflow and there's automation when there can be and all of that kind of stuff. So that kind of is my specialty when it comes to a lot of these things. So if you are a small business and you really require that for something for your small business, holler at your girl. I would absolutely love nothing more than to improve a system for you. I always thought that like maybe I would kind of rent myself out as like an undercover boss too, where I, walk in and, just same kind of idea as the undercover boss. But my main goal would be to suss out if there's bad leadership somewhere. That was a dream for me for a while because no matter where I go, I will find them. I don't know why. It is just something that I am very good at, and I can tell pretty quickly, pretty early on inside of the interactions with an individual, with a leader, whether or not they are good at what they do, or if they are going to end up creating a revolving door of people because they are toxic. But that would need to be me coming in, and I don't want to work for another place where I have to work underneath a toxic boss. It's just not. It's not. And there's been toxicity no matter where I've been. Sometimes it's multiple multiple layers above me. And those moments are nice, right? Like when it's not the person that you have to deal with every single second of the day, that's better. But still, it impacts things when you have toxic leadership. And it's interesting just reflecting on that right now, the fact that every place I've been has had somebody toxic in it that has ruined morale. Let me know in the comments if that's been your situation too. Just reflect on it for a couple of seconds. Have you ever been at any organization of any size where there wasn't somebody by the time you got to the top that was making just crappy decisions that hurt people? Either they don't know how to put together a good meeting, they don't actually follow up on things, they tell you to do one thing, and then when you do that, they're mad that you didn't do the other thing. All of those kinds of things that go on, or the profits over people, because profits over people is probably easily my least favorite part of everything that goes on in any business, like literally any business. Even when it came to public education, it wasn't necessarily about profits over people, but it was about test scores over the kids. It was about keeping the parents happy over actually, right? So the parent does know best, and there's no question about that. But in the situation where you have a kid who's more than capable and you're kind of crippling them intentionally by some of the things that the parent is asking for, that can be really hard as a teacher, because you could probably challenge them more and set them up for success in their lives. But yeah, so all of that brought me to this business. And when I was 7 years old, my next question, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were 7? And how did that change? I wanted to be a dentist when I was 7. And, it's kind of interesting to think about now, but I wanted to help people. And the dentist really helped my dad because he had terrible teeth. He was so embarrassed. He didn't want to like smile pictures or anything else like that. And so I saw that as a way to help people, but I also was really, really fascinated by all of the tools and everything that they had. And I had a really good dentist early on. Shout out to Dr. Mason in New Jersey. I can't even remember what town he was in. Down towards Rutherford, but honestly, drawing a blank. Ridgefield Park. But fantastic family dentist over there. But like everything else in New Jersey, hard to get to. It took a long time, but it was close to my dad's work. And that's the reason why he had chosen that, because he was able to kind of take a little time, go get the dental work, come back and go back to work, because that was what he and his mother had prided themselves on. I remember my grandmother telling me multiple times a story about going and getting her dentures. And when she got all of her teeth pulled, they put the dentures in, and he's like, okay, go home and rest, take Tylenol, da, da, da. And she goes, I'm going to work. She was a forelady on a assembly line at Nabisco in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. And she had to be at work. She got on the bus, she got to work, and she was so numb. She didn't even feel it. She was drooling blood. And the bus driver was like, excuse me, ma'am. And, kind of pointed. And she was like, oh, gosh, but she went to work the same day that they pulled all those teeth out. And that is the kind of worker that she was, because that's what these companies have always done. They've treated people like they are expendable. And if you're not there for a single day, well, that's problematic. And we're not going to keep you. So she couldn't risk that. She was a single mom. She needed to be able to have that income, and she was working on that retirement, and she did eventually retire. And it wasn't an eventually, like she retired at like pretty early age. I think about it now, but she was like a normal age by the time she had my dad. She wasn't that much older than him. But I think she was like maybe 25 years older than my dad. But before I was born, basically, she was retired. And he was 34 when I was born. So, I mean, even if she's at, I think she retired exactly at 65. God bless her. My dad never retired. He worked up until he ended up out of work because he had lung cancer, and he ended up dying and not returning to work and never enjoying any of retirement. So that is not my goal. Those two situations couldn't be more distal from each other, right? And you're just talking about one generation apart. But I refuse to work until the day that I die, and I need to figure out how to live and enjoy what I am doing. And that is part of what I hope to do through this small business, is enjoy the ride and meet people and not feel like I'm working because of this, but also find a way to be able to not work up until the second that I die. Because, in the United States, we've convinced ourselves that we can enjoy things in our retirement, and that we will enjoy things when we retire. And now we don't have time for anything, but when we retire, we'll have it. And that doesn't sit right with me. It really doesn't. I feel like everybody deserves better. And certainly just a couple of generations ago, people did have that. They had that ability. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. She dropped out of school in 8th grade. And yet she was able to retire at 65. My father, against his best efforts, did have a high school diploma. he had no intentions on retiring anytime soon. And he was only 63 when he passed. I don't know. I'd have to double check that, but he wasn't old enough to have passed for sure. But the stress certainly didn't help when it came to the cancer. So for me, I'd like to live a nice long life, but I'd also like to enjoy more of it. And I'd like to enjoy it now instead of only after I retire, because watching my grandmother only enjoy that time after she retired, I don't know. It just didn't look as fun as it could have been. Yeah, she played bingo and yeah, she spent time with her sisters and did all of these things, but she didn't get that extra time with her son before he left the house or with her daughter, my aunt, before she left the house. None of that happened. Work was the most important thing while those kids were still there. And that's sad. And I don't want that for my boys. And so that was one of the reasons why I started this business too, because I was working some long weeks at the other place. And when we were work from home, forget it. I would hop on my computer at 8 o'clock in the morning. I wouldn't get off my computer until like 8, 9 o'clock at night, because I needed to learn the systems. I needed to learn the people and the interactions and all of the things. And we had so many different client groups, and there was a lot of information for me to take up, not just from the interpersonal side of things, but also from the scientific side of things and the trainings. Oh my gosh, it was so much. And I missed out on a lot of time with my kids. And I close my eyes and I can't even think about 2020 with my kids because I don't remember much of it. I do remember playing Uno with them at lunch every single day. That was awesome. And I'm glad that I did that, because I think that was the saving grace, so that they felt like they were seen and cared for a couple of minutes. Barring that, they probably would have felt very ignored. And they were very small. My youngest was only 3 when we moved up here. My oldest was 6. It's a tough time. I'm sure I'm not alone. It was a lot to deal with. And it still is a lot. It's still a lot of cases that are going around. And yet here we are pretending like it's not a thing. But anyway, business, capitalism, woohoo, there we go. So when did I start my business? Officially, the LLC was created in September of 2023, but the idea of it started forming probably about a year and a half before that. And at the beginning of 2023, what I wanted to do was shop more with local small businesses, because that has always been something that I care about. When we moved up here in 2020, I mean, it's the pandemic, right? Like, nobody's going out, nobody's doing these things. I'm trying to find a big toy. That's not going to hurt me. 2020, nobody was going out to these local establishments, or at least we weren't. We were being very careful. My grandmother was going through treatments for bladder cancer at the time. I wanted to be able to see my mom potentially, and my grandmother was living with her. And anyway, and we just didn't want anybody to be getting sick, and we didn't want to give it to anybody. So we were very careful. And so we didn't do a lot of exploring, and we should have in the car, right? But also I'm a scientist. So I'm eco-conscious. I don't believe in just like wandering around in my car the same way that I did when I was 17. But we have done a little bit more of that now recently, so that we can kind of find some stuff, because not everything has a website. And that was also another piece that I really realized once we got up here. Being in northern New Jersey and 25 minutes away from New York City, you get accustomed to a different level of everything in comparison to being out in more rural areas. And I'm not completely rural. I'm just outside of the capital. I'm in the capital district of upstate New York, so just outside of Albany. But that did not mean that the level of service, the expectations in terms of website and all of that kind of stuff was going to be the same, because it's not. It's just not. The number of places that we were for the first the way that all of that was, I was like, gosh, that seems like an area that I might be able to help with, because I don't know. I'm a tech native. When it comes to all of these new tech platforms, it's super easy for me to be able to pick it up along the way. I find the analogous thing from other softwares, and I just go for it. I don't necessarily sit through all the trainings and stuff like that. I wanna test it and do that, but then eventually I'll go back and ask specific questions of the trainings and kind of seek that out. So for me, website, getting it set up is a easy thing. and I've done it through 3 or 4 different platforms actually at this point too. I don't code. I don't have that experience. And so it's most of these like plug and play things that they have that exist at this point, which is so cool because in 2024, you don't have to be able to code to create a website, but you could, and you could do it through ChatGPT too, because it'll write the code for you. I actually checked that out. It's pretty neat. But so in terms of that one, I had thought the other day about starting to tutor for some of these platforms. So I have StreamYard. That nobody needs a tutor for StreamYard. This is so intuitive. I love this software. If you are looking to host a podcast, if you're looking to have these kinds of conversations, you should absolutely do this. It is so intuitive. I love it. But I also have a Movavi suite where I have the video editor and the photo editor and all that kind of stuff. Definitely walk somebody through that kind of thing. And really, any of the video editing software is going to have, for the most part, analogous things, right? Whether you're working in Adobe or not. I think Adobe is probably the one that is the most specific from what I've heard from the research. I refuse to pay for a subscription every single month. I wanted something that I could download, that I could have. And so Movavi made the most sense for me. But that if you're more willing to have that, I think the subscription economy is the thing that I am the most morally opposed to, because it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And I feel like every single business has a subscription. Every single business has another way to be able to do it. By the way, subscribe to our channel. Yeah. Okay, cool. But that doesn't cost you a thing. And make sure that you're liking this video wherever you're seeing it. I would really appreciate it. Even though there's nobody on this live, because my stuff does not get pushed out. And so that has been a challenge, right? Like thinking about the fact that a business account doesn't get the traction that I feel like it really deserves for a small business. And the bigger corporations, they have the ad money to be able to push everything out via ads. And I could boost this with an ad or something like that, but who has the money to be able to do that in a small business? But yeah, anyway. Yeah, I got a little sidetracked in terms of that. But what brought me to start my own business and the last straw to be able to start my own business was things just getting completely out of hand at the place that I was working at. I felt like I was holding my finger in the dam and my other finger in the dam and my other finger in the dam. I was trying to hold a lot of things back, and I just wasn't getting the support that I really needed from my senior leadership. And there was just so much going on, and the team was so big, and I never felt. That's not true. The majority of days, I did not feel like I was capable of doing my job to the level that I would want to do my job. And that's hard. In the place prior, it was more days than not that I could. And I left it. And that's sad. I'm glad that we left New Jersey, though. I've been so happy living in upstate New York. I love it here. I love the space. I love that there's more cows than people at the beginning of the pandemic. I loved that. That I really loved. Feeling like I could really keep my family safe. There were more cases in the town that we came from in New Jersey than there were in the entire county that we came to. And so that felt like a really important decision to make. Now everything's kind of leveled off, right? It's all evened out. It's spread out so much that the prevalence of COVID and flu and RSV and all of those kinds of things is equal almost regardless of where you are inside of those situations. But I've been able to make some really meaningful connections up here. It's been fantastic, especially connecting with some nonprofits in the area locally. I'm going to give a really quick shout out to Community Life Support, which is run out of the Presbyterian Church in Schaghticoke. And I just absolutely have been so appreciative of all of their elementary incident. That's interesting. I'll have to take a look at that. I've been so appreciative of all of their support. Lynne and Liz are fantastic, and they developed this community group to be able to help the folks in Scagco. And I think it's beautiful. And I've been really lucky to be able to work on a couple of things for them. And I'm not going to say exactly what they are because I haven't asked for their approval for that yet. And I don't want to cross the line in terms of that. But on top of that, they've just been really, really good to me. When I pitched my ideas of what I wanted my business to be, they were immediately like, we're in, let's go, let's do this. And, they took advantage of a couple of my services, which were really awesome for me, that somebody would put their faith in me. Especially considering, like, you think about what my services are here so far. Let's get that rundown and then I'm going to call it. Okay. So this will be like from the beginning of the business to where we are today and how that has transformed. Because, part of my question is how did things change over time? How did they not change over time would probably be an easier question to answer, to be honest with you. So at first, my vision was for a local, hyper local marketplace online that would provide opportunities for people to have their small business highlighted without being buried underneath a bajillion search results. And I'm definitely circling the drain here, right? Because there's a lot that underpins this. And this is interesting. And I'm going to just use this as an opportunity to talk my way through this because nobody's here. So you're a captive audience of one, me. And I am a verbal processor, so I talk my way through things. So ads are really the piece that I think make small businesses incapable of success. And I'll say that a different way. Monopolies occur and consolidation of power and wealth occurs in part, in a very big part, due to commercials. And so I saw that as something because I looked at a couple of different things, right? And, you're gonna start your own thing. You're researching what are the side hustles that you could do. I was making good money at the last position that I was in, but that didn't mean that it was good in terms of an increasing mortgage because of taxes going up and all of that kind of stuff, and having 2 kids and them having to be in summer camp, which is just astronomically expensive at this point, which makes no sense to me at all. And the fact that the whole setup of society is so isolatory. Even when we were in New Jersey, we were close to my family. It's not like we had any help. So it's not like the move made it that much worse. But, thinking about what that side hustle would be that would be transitioned into the small business, I did a lot of research and just things were not values aligned. And I need values aligned. That's main reasons why I was leaving my last role is because I didn't feel values aligned with what I was being asked to do. Maybe not necessarily with people specifically or the company as a whole, but there were a lot of moments of moral injury where I was being asked to do things that I felt went against my values. And I didn't want to be continuously put in that position because you feel a level of spiritual death when you are consistently put in a position where you have to do things that are not the right thing to do in this situation. And I feel like that happened to me in education too, where I knew what I would want to do, but my hands were tied. But anywho, so I looked at a bunch of things, and one person had reached out to me and was like, "Oh, you need to flip rentals. All right, cool. Let's have a conversation. Let me find out about what you do." And more than anything, I just wanted to learn about this person and his system, because he had a system and a book and all this kind of stuff. And he took the time to be able to have this pro bono conversation with me. And, he explained to me how he goes into these areas and he finds these rentals that are out of date. And he goes in and does the minimum amount of work possible to be able to put some lipstick on the pig. And then he flips it. And now it's much more expensive. And not doing any real meaningful work, hoping not to open the walls because he doesn't want to know if there's knob and tube wiring or asbestos or any of those kinds of things, right? It's not about the tenant. It's about the profit. And so it was a people over profit situation. I'm out. I can't do it. People over profits just makes me nauseous. I can't do it. So then I look into affiliate marketing. Okay, affiliate marketing. Always bath time for Bonzo back there, West Sweet Boy. Okay. I know I'm not the only one that just turns into immediately like baby talk when I see anything with that gap. So affiliate marketing, cool. I had purchased so many things from Amazon, especially when my kids were young. Like I have weaned myself off of Amazon over the course of time because it's not healthy. The fact that you can get these recurring orders and the fact that you can go on and boop, this thing is to your house in 2 days is almost too convenient. And it makes it to where there's so little friction to buying the thing that you become the ultimate consumer, which I'm sure is part of the logic behind making things that way, right? But I always thought that just a new organizer or just a new bag or just a new this or just a new notebook or, whatever was going to be the thing that was going to make the difference for me. And it wasn't. It never made things better. And when we moved out of that house, I swore that I was not going to do that again because it just didn't help. And it just became more clutter because it was the thing that no longer was getting used. And now it's clutter in the corner and you resell it. And I tried to resell a book on Facebook Marketplace recently. And I only put it up for $5, right? And I was like, yeah, sure, shipping, click. And this woman buys a book. I come to find that the book has been destroyed, so I can't send it out, which is super sad. But it worked out in the end because they charged $4 for shipping. So I go to use my Pirate Ship website because they do a great job at getting you some discounts for small businesses. If you've never heard about it as a small business and you ship things, infrequently, I would highly recommend Pirate Ship. Anyway, this is not sponsored or anything else like that. I just absolutely love them. So I go to, it's going to cost me $9. And then Facebook takes their fee, right? So I'm going to pay to ship this thing to somebody else. Well, it worked out that it was destroyed because it definitely was not going to work out financially. And so the resale market, not something I want to be doing. And affiliate marketing for Amazon just felt out of alignment with my values because a lot of it is coming off of Temu too, right? So like if I'm going to do resale off of Temu, there's some stuff. And I feel like I've only shelved the idea of that. I haven't completely gotten rid of that idea because the one thing I will say that there is very little of in the small business space is kids' toys, right? So when I look locally and I try and find something micro business, small business, whatever, if I'm going to support a small business, I can't find stuff for my kids. And I tried all year last year because that was one of the big things. Because if I'm going to spend money, at the end of the day, my kids are going to be the ones that I'm going to spend extra money on before anybody else. And so that for me felt like a big void of a space. And so I've kind of shelved that. But in terms of affiliate marketing for Amazon, it's not values aligned. Affiliate marketing for small businesses, though, I could get behind. And so that is something that I am definitely willing to do. And that is something that I hope to continue to expand upon over the course of time, because I want to be able to get these amazing products from these amazing small businesses in front of people, because that is values aligned. It is values aligned to me to want to help you to make money as a small business. It is values aligned for me to help an individual know about a small business that they didn't know about before. It is values aligned for me to help you to find eco-friendly, clean products that are different than the stuff that is owned by the same 4 companies. And there's a great TikToker who has done a lot of work on trying to figure out the origins of a lot of your personal care products. So deodorants, shampoos, conditioners, face stuff, whatever, body wash. And you can look at an aisle in Target and look at the whole thing. And there's like 2 little guys down here that are actually independent. Everything else is from a mega corporation, every single other thing. And it's because these mega corporations, not only do they have more money to be able to buy commercials so that they can buy your attention, because your attention is very, very important, they can also buy each other. And that was something that also prompted me to go into education because that was really happening in that period of time for biopharmaceuticals in New Jersey. There were a lot of companies that were just swallowing each other, big fish eating the bigger fish, and all this other kind of stuff. And it made it to where it was a pretty scary job market. And I was getting out of college right as the recession of 2008 was in the middle, I guess, of the recession. Um, so I felt lucky to be able to have a job, but making that decision to pivot and go into education also made sense from a job security standpoint. It definitely didn't make sense from a financial standpoint because I took a $15,000 pay cut to be able to go be an educator. And I never made that money back by the time I left, almost a decade. But that was also because Chris Christie figured out how to gut public education in every which way possible. He also did plenty of that to the police unions, but they got off much better than the educators because the police are there to be able to protect the wealthy landowner, right? So they can't gut them nearly as badly as they can gut the teachers. So, and I'm not trying to get political. These are just literally facts. Like this is like Chris Christie was gunning for unions and he successfully did it. So if you are pro-union and pro-Chris Christie in any way, you should probably think about that for a couple of minutes because he did a lot of damage in New Jersey because of that. And there's a lot of brain drain that happens, right? If people can't make a living, how I had a degree and I was so lucky because my dad was able to pay for my degree outright. I didn't end up in a position where I had to pay for it myself or have a whole bunch of student debt or anything else like that. And still, life was not affordable at all, especially with 2 kids in daycare. I mean, legitimately, my job when I was teaching paid for our mortgage and 75% of the daycare. Like my husband's job had to cover like literally everything else. And you wonder why so many households in America are drowning, especially if they have children. It's really, really hard to be in a situation where you have kids and you're trying to do the right thing by them. And then the expectation around, the holidays and their birthdays and all those kinds of things. And none of it was ever made better by my family because it's not like they were trying to take some of that burden off of our plate. And I know that I'm not alone in any way, shape, or form. But I think that it's important for us to consider all of those things when we think about the reasons why small businesses really are important. So I want to leave you with this for small businesses. So small businesses, when I found out that 99% of businesses in the United States are small businesses, and I'm really not happy with this live stream on YouTube right now because I can see a delay and I can see it freezing. And I'm really just not understanding as to why, because on Instagram, everything seems to be fine, but the one on YouTube has been just badly behaved today. I got to figure out if that's something that I'm doing. Maybe it's the bandwidth of this live. I'll probably stay on a couple of minutes here and see if I can test it and get that to be off and see if it makes it better. But, oh, Farid, how are you? So yeah, 99% of businesses in America are small businesses, which means that they have a lot of jobs also. So it's just shy of 50% of the jobs in the United States are hosted by small businesses. And the average small business owner is not making a good salary whatsoever. The average salary of their workers is 70% of their budget. So small businesses spend 70% of their budgets just to pay their people. That's a lot of money. It's a lot to take in. And a lot of them are paying lower wages, maybe, than a corporation. Maybe that was true 30 years ago. But right now, that's not true anymore. They're basically in the same spot in terms of how much, for the love, the number of notifications coming through. And I wish they were for my website. Who's hitting up my link tree at this point? But the number of CEOs in these big corporations that are making huge payouts and the amount of shareholder value that they have provided over the course of time could have very easily been reinvested back into their employees instead and reinvested back into the area where they are. Small businesses do reinvest. it's interesting because I work for a couple of nonprofits, like I told you, and one of the first things they think of are let's go to a local business and let's see if they are going to sponsor our team or give us a basket for a donation. I just put together a basket for a basket raffle for somebody, and really it's because the items didn't move. That was one of the things that I decided that I was going to do. I was going to do resale for small business stuff. I was going to create like subscription boxes, basically. Anyway, so they contribute to all of these things and they support them. And these big corporations, for the most part, they don't. They don't feel any level of obligation to put their name on the back of somebody's jersey because they don't need that level of exposure because they can spend $7 million on a 30-second ad during the Super Bowl. And the small business never will. And I'm going to be honest with you. I really wish the FCC would do all small businesses a huge favor and tell these corporations that they can sponsor ads for small businesses next year. That would be cool. They could go through a vetting process. No competitions or anything else like that, because that's garbage. Small businesses already go through enough hoops. No pay to play in terms of like, buying a ticket or anything else like that. There would have to be some really good rules in terms of it, but they don't need that 30-second ad spot. How much money did they spend on creating the ad? And then they spent $7 million on the ad. How much did their CEO make? How much stock buybacks did they do? How much shareholder value did they provide? And yet, some of their people need food stamps. Are we kidding? I just feel like as a country, our values are so misaligned when it comes to the way that we deal with business. And the big businesses get all of the business and the small businesses get nothing and nobody's there to help them. And that's the reason why I wanted to start this business. I want to help small businesses and I want to help you in any way that you need me to help you. And I know that this conversation has been all over the map and it's really only the first 4 questions that I have in my podcast interview, but I thought that it was valuable to be able to share this because I want small business owners and future small business owners and small business shoppers alike to understand why I am doing what I am doing, because it might seem like it's all over the place, or it might seem like it's out of nowhere, but it's out of love. It's out of the fact that I was working 50, 60 hours a week when you total up all of the time in the car too, out of the house. And there was no way for me to support small business. So I forgot to finish that story, but in 2023, in January, one of my resolutions was that I was going to shop with small business. What a joke. How are you going to do that when I'm not getting out of work until 6 o'clock and it takes me another 30 minutes to be able to get back? And the small business is closed by the time I get home. On top of the fact that I'm completely exhausted, I have nothing left to give. And then I'm going to have to go to 10 different small businesses if I'm going to do it on a weekend. I'm going to spend so much time in the car going back and forth because when you're in a rural area, this isn't a walkable situation. We're talking about 30 minutes in this direction of that town, 30 minutes over here, 30 minutes over there, in order to be able to support the small businesses exclusively for something. And I tried to do it for my son's birthday because I thought that that would really be the thing that I would be able to figure out. Nope. No way. Absolutely not. Even not working that 60-hour-a-week job, it literally was going to be bad for the environment for me to do it. And so I wanted to find a way to create more sustainability around that. But Uber and a couple of other companies that do that kind of stuff, their model makes for complexities inside of potentially doing a model like that, especially with insurance. Insurance gets expensive really quick when you have somebody else's merchandise in your car. And the business insurance to go on an automobile is wild. And that was kind of my initial thought. If I could look at this area that's tucked away, that the parking stinks, that it's so hard to get to, but the stores are amazing. I'll go pick up all these orders, bring them to a local grocer that's on a main road, that's on the way home for everybody so that they have the ability to pick it up on their way home. But before you have an economy of scale, you're either losing money or you're gouging the consumer. So that one's a hard one to start up. And if there's an investor that decides that they want to pour a bunch of money into that, I will absolutely accept it. But there better not be any strings attached because I'm not interested in any of that. I will not be micromanaged. I will not deal with any more toxic bosses. Mentoring, sure, cool, but only if it is an optional situation, I suppose. But I thought that that would be a really good way to make it more sustainable and make it more sustainable for the individual too. You imagine that somebody is going to be in that area 30 minutes away for these 5 other orders. Cool. Now that makes sense. Bring it to this local spot. And now this person gets all of their orders and it's from all of these different places. And if they totaled up the amount of time and gas that it would have required for them to do all of those individual trips, that's going to be worthwhile to them. And then whatever fee you're charging them is going to still make sense. And it's not gouging. It's literally like having a personal shopper who can help you to shop in alignment with your values. The biggest challenge that I had with that, though, is that I want to be inclusive. And I don't want to limit it to only people who are making money. Wow. StreamYard platform's not doing so good today, huh? Weird. All right. Anyway, um, gosh, I don't even know where I was. I keep getting interrupted here in terms of this one. Hi, Mel's. How are you? Um, so in terms of the subscription boxes, I thought they would be really cool. And I had one that was for sustainability, and they're still on my website. If you decide that you want to click in the link tree right now, at least they're still in the website. Not really quite sure where I'm going from there. A lot of it may end up getting donated, which is totally good. But I think that for me, I don't want to be a middleman that's further increasing price on anything. That's really the biggest thing. I want to make sure that I'm getting small businesses uplifted in a way that's meaningful for them. Help them to tell their story. I love the podcast idea. I clearly like to talk. I would love to give this at conferences and stuff like that. I love giving speeches. I gave a speech to about 200 people. My last speaking engagement, and those are the kinds of situations that really fuel me. I love those. And for the most part, it's informational, but it's inspirational and stuff like that. But I don't know who would be in the market for someone with as varied of a background as me, but certainly even at a high school, talking about these things with high school students so that they know that there is no wrong path to choose. Whatever path you choose is the right one. That's it. I hope that I get opportunities to mentor more students over the course of my lifetime as they're entering the workforce as well. And I'm going to do that through private channels and trying to figure that out, like offering my time for schools and stuff like that. But I definitely like to be able to do those kinds of speaking engagements. And so from there, I've done some of this social media bit, right? And I've done a couple of websites, and I like doing websites. They're a satisfying level of art form for me because I'm not very artistic with my hands, but I am really good with digital art. And then I guess the last couple of things, most recently, I started doing doodly. I don't know if you've ever seen those little like hand doodle videos, but I'm thinking of creating some opportunities to do like training videos and stuff like that with those. So if you're interested in something like that, I would absolutely love to hear from you. You can let me know. I am going to have one getting released as a trailer for the podcast and for opportunities to be able to join me as a podcast guest shortly. Maybe today, probably tomorrow. And I'm really proud of the way that one came out. That one's really cool. I do like that. Once again, those analogous skill sets of being able to do all of the stuff with the editing for the videos, for the documentary that I supported that student with, really puts me in a position where I feel really comfortable with those things. So all is that to say, I am still looking for my niche. I am still looking for the thing that helps the world. I'm still looking for what makes me capable of helping a small business. And I'd like to be able to do at least some of it through this podcast. And for anybody who ends up watching this episode, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to be able to watch it. And I'd love to know what your questions are in the comments. I'm hoping that Thursday we will be good to go with Denise so that we can have a conversation with her. She is fantastic. I met her through some social channels, and she's doing some really great things in her neighborhood, not just as a realtor, but also as an entrepreneur and also as someone who's trying to uplift her community on a consistent basis. She's doing the real work, you know? So I look forward to having the conversation with her on Thursday. I hope you'll join me if you're available at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I want to thank you again. God, golly, I got to put my phone on Do Not Disturb before I come into these. Huh? I want to thank you for taking the time to be able to sit here and have this conversation with me today. And please, as always, remember to shop local whenever possible. Go out and find that local small business near you and give them a shout out on social media for nothing, just for free. Give them a great review if you love their product. Do something to be able to uplift a small business today near you, whether it's purchasing from them or interacting and engaging with some of their social media. You don't know how much that makes their day. So many of these small businesses are very similar to mine in terms of the engagement that they get on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or any of the places, because most people just scroll past. And even if they watch the whole thing, they're not engaging, they're not liking, they're not commenting, they're not subscribing, because they don't want more commercials shoved in their face. And I totally get it. But small businesses are not the reason why you don't want a commercial shoved in your face. We got to remember those things. We got to remember really where that fresh be directed.